it's really good to have Donnie back and Sandy, that as they'll come and share the ministry. They are retiring from Singapore, or I should say have retired from Singapore, and they'll be sharing more about an update of everything that's transpired in the last 8 years. Don, please come.
One more. There you go. Just give me a minute to.
Would you feel more comfortable standing up there?
No, that makes me really nervous.
That makes you.
And it makes them really tall.
That makes it really tall too. Okay. Do you need a light out?
There.
Did you want the light out for this portion?
Nah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Can you see?
That's
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to come and share and tell about God's work. We're not here to talk about Don and Sandy. We're here to talk about what God did and is doing in Singapore. And all of you are part of that. Big thank you for your 5 years of sacrificial giving as you financially partnered with Sandy and I so that we could continue our work there. This morning, we plan to tell you a little bit about Singapore, the culture, its strategic location.
Did you want to use the mic? I think it might be able to hear a little better. in the
Maybe you
back.
can, yeah.
I don't know if they can hear you in the back or not.
Sandy talks really soft. I have to wear hearing aids so I can hear her. I have a booming voice. And we want to talk about the work of OMF in that region. I was praying about what to share because I take this time really seriously. I just don't come up here and ramble on about stuff. But God spoke to me about something important in my life, and that is the theme for this morning. Remembering what God did in the past to help us move forward today. Sandy and I have completed 8 wonderful years in Singapore, and now we are asking, what's next? The past few weeks, I've been reading about the laws that God gave Moses and the Israelites that were recorded in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. One example from Leviticus 26, 9 through 13. I will look favorably upon you, making you fertile and multiplying your people, and I will fulfill my covenant with you. You will have such a surplus of crops that you will need to clear out the old grain to make room for the new harvest. I will live among you. I will not despise you. I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, so you would no longer be their slaves. I broke the yoke of slavery from your neck, so that you can walk with your heads held high. God is reminding them of what he did in the past, his great power, bringing them out of Egypt. Another example in Deuteronomy 31, 4-6. The Lord will destroy the nations living in the land, just as he destroyed Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites. The Lord will hand over to you the people who live there, and you must deal with them as I have commanded you. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not panic before them, for the Lord your God will personally go ahead of you, for he will neither fail you nor abandon you. Again, God is reminding them of what he did in the past. His great power defeated these 2 great nations. God was with us in the past, and he continues to be with us now. We need not be anxious about the future. Sandy and I are getting settled back into our house and life in Lancaster. There are many unanswered questions about our future, but we need not be anxious. God continues to be with us, just as he has been the past 8 years. I'll come back to this theme in my closing comments. It is our prayer that sharing this morning will encourage you, that whatever uncertainty you may be facing, you will be encouraged. We're going to start talking about our roles, what we did in Singapore.
Okay, so one of the things that I did was manage the dining room. Our campus was the international headquarters for OMF International, so everybody who was anybody with OMF came through Singapore at one time or another. And so one of my most fun roles was managing the dining room, and these are some of our helpers there. And Don managed the facility, and so you see him there in his getup. He's outside doing gardening in his yellow boots and his mask. That was during COVID, and we even had to wear masks outside. Do you want to say anything more about that?
I'm a very hands-on kind of guy, but I had to decide what it was okay for me to do and what my national staff should do. So on the weekend, like on a Saturday when my national staff wasn't working, I would get out the ladder and wash windows. I felt compelled that anything I could do to help maintain the campus that didn't interfere or cause a cultural mishap was okay for me to do. I did a lot of painting because I could. And it saved the organization some money that we didn't have to pay a painter to do everything. We certainly did pay a lot of local tradesmen to do things, but certain things I like to tackle. My manager wasn't happy that I was up on a ladder washing windows. This is my local maintenance technician, Coquelion. He was Singaporean. He was my right-hand man. We developed a very close relationship because I valued him, I trusted him, and I did not interfere with how he did his work. I gave him an assignment and just left it up to him. We talked about the outcome, we talked about what it should look like when it was finished, what the goal was, but I didn't insert my American way of thinking into what he was going to do. And he actually did a fantastic job, and many times he would actually come up with a better solution than what I came up with. A lot of my work was building relationships and respecting people of other culture.
This gives you a bird's eye view of our campus. One of the things that you can see there is those terracotta roofs. And one of the jobs that Don had done before we left was to have them all scrubbed off so that they're all nice and clean and beautiful. He did not do that himself, by the way. So this is just looking at the campus. Up in the top part of the picture, sort of in the center, is our administrative buildings. And then going to the right is into our dining room. On the second level is offices, and then the guest home is kind of at the bottom of the picture, kind of cut off of the picture. Here's a picture from the back looking toward the campus. Lots of green, lots of bamboo, short bamboo on the ground, and just we're really in the middle of what was a rainforest at one time. And here's a picture looking out across our volleyball court, which got lots of use when people were there. So as I said, one of my jobs was managing the guest home. So this is a picture of me in my office, and just making sure that people got into the right room and had a room when they got there, and having the rooms prepared. This is the lobby of the guest home where people could come and hang out. This is one of the areas that Don painted during COVID, and we also rearranged some furniture, got some new donations, and kind of freshened it up. I also had some local staff people that I worked with. Oops, wrong key. This is our laundress, Fatima. Fatima is a Muslim, She has been working at OMF for 25 years. She's still working there. She comes in every day, does all the laundry. When she leaves, she gets all dressed up like you see her in that bottom picture. She usually is just to the hilt. She's just a very beautiful lady, always smiling. But she doesn't know the Lord. And so it's on my heart that someday, because of the people that she's interfaced with there at OMF, she will come to know Jesus. So you can pray for Fatima. She would allow me to come in and pray with her, and that was just really a privilege to be able to come in. I try to do it at least once a week, just come in and ask her how I could pray for her. And so that was just a really neat experience. So pray for Fatima. This is a picture of our dining room. As you can see, it's a fairly large area. We could seat roughly 80 people there, and then there's also some outside space, a beautiful terrace where you can also sit in lovely weather. And here's some more of our kitchen volunteers. You can see them in the back there. They're just wonderful people. And Evelyn, the lady in the middle there, was our head cook. She's from the Philippines. She's another lady who I just really enjoyed working with. She's from a Catholic background, and I don't know if you know anything about the Philippines, but in the Philippines, Catholicism isn't anything like maybe what it is here, but it's more animistic, and people kind of worship little idols and things like that. And so she came from this very convoluted Catholicism. But she always asked really good questions about who is Jesus, and had opportunities to pray with her for herself, for her husband's health, and she saw how God answered prayers. And actually, about 2 years ago, I guess it is now, she actually attended Alpha on Zoom with a group from our local church there in Singapore, and she's really trying to serve the Lord now. So that's another neat story that just happy to be a part of. And this is our cleaning team. Again, people from various cultures who come to us, can't always communicate well with us, but they're very important to what happens on our campus, and just an opportunity for ministry with local people. Do you want to say anything more about that? No? Okay, this is an example of one of our guest rooms. Just like to have them looking fresh and nice and clean for people. And just the view out of our dining room window. So this is what we saw every day from our flat. And so if you can imagine living and working at the same place, we look out our window, we see our work. Sometimes that was very challenging.
You see two things when you look out. You see something that someone is doing that they shouldn't be, or you see something that should be being done and isn't. Either way, when you look out, it may not make you feel happy.
Okay, and this is our auditorium. You can see there's a group gathered for meetings. Actually, this isn't the auditorium. Yes, it is.
It is.
Sorry.
It's okay.
And we entertain groups there all the time from OMF, and also sometimes on the weekend we had outside groups come from local churches. So it was always a busy place on our campus.
Just hold that there for a minute. The photographs that you saw of the beautiful campus, God provided that property about 50 years ago, before Singapore was even a country. The missionaries that were driven out of China under the communist regime in the late 50s came to Singapore to sort of get reorganized. The missionaries themselves had a little bit of money that they were able to take with them out of China. When they got to Singapore, God led them to that property. They paid $83,000 for it back in the 50s. And that was still a lot of money then. But that piece of property that God led them to is now one of the most valuable properties in all of Singapore. God did not lead the OMF people to a swamp or a piece of worthless real estate. Now it is worth probably $200 to $300 million. We're right across the street from the Botanic Garden. And I say all of that, not in a proud way, but I say that to give honor to God. Looking back at what God did in the past to help you move forward today, there's another example of how God looked out after his own some 50 years ago in getting them to that property. Singapore, and we'll talk about that next. Yeah, and you can work through that. We're going to talk about why Singapore and this region of the world is important. This is what we call the 50-50 porthole next. In that circle, and it may be difficult to see from where you're sitting, hit the key again, please. In that circle, Singapore is about in the middle. We're south of Malaysia, we're south of Thailand, we're a small island surrounded by water. 53% of the world's population lives in that circle, which includes India, includes part of China, and then it includes all of these other countries that are popping up around the sides. OMF works in all of those countries and that are in that circle where 53% of the world's population lives. Next slide. Of that 53% of the world's population in that circle, 91% don't know Jesus, nor do they have an easy way to learn about Jesus. They're not going to rub shoulders with a Christian. There's not going to be a church anywhere near them. They're unreached. So that area of the world, that population center is really important. And I want to comment about how important your support was to that region of the world. While you were supporting us in Singapore, we were in contact and in touch, and people from all of those countries were coming to Singapore for medical, for visas, for training, for whatever reason. So your support of Sandy and I actually touched all of those other countries and all of those unreached people because you were supporting us. Your financial and prayer support was a vital part of God's work. You, this congregation, you have been an important link in the chain of God's global work to reach the nations. Just want to say thank you. You need to understand how important what you do and how you give. It's making a difference. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about why it was important that God brought OMF to Singapore. There's a lot of things about Singapore that are very unique, and all those countries that you saw up there are close by, but yet if God had brought OMF to any of those countries, right now there's probably no way that they could be doing what they're doing. One of the things unique about Singapore is that they have what they call the Religious Harmony Act. And so we would see mosques like what you see here within the same walking distance of Chinese temples, Buddhist temples, and also Hindu temples. And they might all be within like a 1-block area. They are all over Singapore, as well as Christian churches, which we didn't take a picture of. But these are all close by, and Singapore has the Religious Harmony Act, as I mentioned, so that all religions have to be treated the same. I can't go out on a street corner in Singapore shoving tracts in people's faces and talking, standing there, yelling that the end is coming, say, you know, Jesus will save you, and those kind of things. But I can be sitting on a bus, maybe reading my Bible, and if somebody asks me about it, I can talk to them about it. So it's kind of a really neat thing that there in Singapore, all the religions get along together and try to survive together, and OMF can exist there and do the things that they do. You want to say any more about that?
Yeah, you can scroll through those as I continue to talk. Since our departure, we've been reflecting on things that God brought to us that allowed us to flourish. I think about us being senior in age, there would have been a great opportunity for us to crash and burn as we were going to a different culture, having to learn new things, survive in some very unfamiliar settings. But it was all very positive, and we give the credit to God. We had great support from our churches here in the U.S. We have 3 partner churches, and you are one of those. And all 3 of our churches stayed in touch with us via emails. They took our prayer requests. They responded to our newsletters. That support was invaluable. That caused us to flourish. We got involved in a local church. We were involved in a variety of ministries with our local Singaporean church. We found times of rest and recreation. This slide, back,
There?
no, the rooftop garden.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you
There.
got ahead of me on the foreign workers. This was a place we would like to go for a cheap date. We could get a $3 meal at the ground floor of this tall high-rise, and we could go up and have a rooftop meal. And on that particular night that we went up, those 2 images were taken at about the same time. The moon was coming up in one direction in the, I'm not sure that was exactly east, but the sun was setting in the west. We saw both of those dramatic scenes. God provided us times away, times of refreshment, and that was important. The foreign workers, I think we missed that.
They're back. You want to talk about
The foreign workers, this is the gardening crew that would come once a week, and would do gardening on our campus. They couldn't do everything, but they did the heavy work, and then I finished off what I could. These are foreign workers who live in India and Bangladesh. They leave their families, they come and they live in Singapore. They live in dormitories. The life is not very good. They're treated like second class or invisible citizens, almost like untouchables. I had an opportunity to visit their dormitory and try to teach them computer skills and some English. That was really rewarding. But God orchestrated a lot of things in order for that to happen. That didn't necessarily drop into my lap. I pursued some things, and through that ministry in the dormitory, I also was able to get connected with a language teacher, and I learned some conversational phrases in Bengali. And I was able to converse briefly with just a guy on the street, so to speak. And I would ask him if he's from India or Bangladesh, and when I knew that he was from Bangladesh, I would ask him his name, how are you doing, how long have you been in Singapore? The look on his face was worth all the effort to learn those few phrases. Because number one, a white man never speaks, very rarely speaks to a dark-skinned foreign worker on the street. Certainly not to ask how is he doing or what is his name. It was an amazing way. I certainly couldn't share the gospel with them. My language wasn't that great, but I tried to be Jesus to them wherever I was. And that was true in the dormitory as well. We weren't openly able to share our faith, but those foreign workers knew. They knew God was important to us.
They would ask you, why do you come?
Why do you come and do this? Because we didn't charge. That was a really meaningful aspect of our life in Singapore.
You took out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, well,
I know.
yeah. This was another favorite spot that we like to visit, to get away. For times of rest. It's important to understand that when you give out in ministry all the time, and you give out and you give out, you need to have time to refill. Because eventually your tank will become depleted, you'll become empty, and then you'll come in for a very hard landing. So we're both workaholics, so we tried to be sensitive to that and understand that we need time for rest and to get away as well. This is some of our colleagues that lived on the campus with us. They had a variety of leadership positions here with this representation, with this photo. These are the people we rub shoulders with. Sometimes it's a bit frustrating to work with internationals. because they look like you, but they think differently, they respond differently, and they process what you say to them differently. So it was a good experience, but sometimes it was difficult to understand the cultural nuances and to work through that. Next. This photo represents one of the many places we got to visit while we were in Singapore for 8 years. This photograph was taken in Cambodia. Before we left Singapore, we made a little vacation to Cambodia for 10 days. This is at Angkor Wat, Siem Reap. I'm very thankful for the opportunities that we got to visit Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Taiwan. I think that was it. And while we were in Singapore. And not because they were glamorous vacations. Yeah, they were a time of rest, which is what we needed. But often we got to see the local people, the local context, and we better understood how ministry is done in each of these areas. We also saw the hopelessness of these areas without Christ. And then we saw the great need, and we saw the reason why these areas need Christ. They need God. They live in many places in a state of hopelessness because of their own false religions. So I'm appreciative of that. Next slide. So here we are. 8 years have passed. We've been back home for about 3 months. So what's next? And when you get to be our age, you have to wonder, well, is the best behind me? Is it sort of, downhill from here on out? And it's easy to fall into that, and I'm choosing not to. I'm choosing to think that the best is yet to come, even though I may not know what that best is. Or maybe that best doesn't line up with what I think best is. But regardless, I'm trusting God that the best is yet to come. I will return to full-time work. So I'm faced with looking for a job. Things are different in my industry than they were 8 years ago when I left. So I'm going to have to learn some new things. Can an old dog learn new tricks? I think so. Our full-time association with OMF will end at the end of June, and then we'll continue in a part-time volunteer kind of status. Sandy is exploring some opportunities how she can volunteer with OMF from home, and of course be a grandmother. We have been invited by a class of young people at our home church in Lancaster to join them and to do life with them. And we're looking forward to that, sort of a mentoring kind of role. This fall, we'll participate in a training of short-term missions team leaders. And so there's a few things on our horizon, but there's a lot of questions. I'm looking at these next months as a blank slate. Past 8 years are finished. In one regard, God is wiping the slate clean, and we will rewrite what's going to happen in the future, these next upcoming months. But the unique thing about it is the slate is the same. And the slate contains all that has happened to us in Singapore, because we're not the same people. But we will move forward in the next months and years being changed people because of that experience in Singapore. And we want to leverage that. We don't want to lose that Singapore experience as we move forward and tell ourselves, oh, that's all in the past. It no longer is relevant. It is relevant. That's what God poured into us, and we want to carry that with us as we move forward. That's my youngest grandchild. We're at the mall. I'm looking forward to getting to know the grandchildren anew. 5 of them were born while we were gone. So a lot of opportunity for relationship building. the wheelbarrow and the piano. Seeing God's provision in the small things helps me to be content in the big things. When I came back home, my wheelbarrow was gone. We had to downsize. We had a renter in our house, so some things I had to give away. I gave away my wheelbarrow. A friend of mine brought me one after I was whining about not having a wheelbarrow. God cares about little things. Sandy always had a piano. When we left for Singapore, the piano was given away. We came home to an empty, quiet house, no piano. That piano was free from our home church. God cares about music in our house. God cares about Sandy having a piano to play. He cares about the little things. So in closing, let's come back to the scripture that speak about God bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. This is what I understand about how important that is, what he did. God's plan and protection began when he moved Jacob's family to Egypt by sending Joseph ahead and therefore saving their lives from the severe famine. They flourished there for many years, and then hardship began. But God did not forget them. He heard their cries. God prepared and sent Moses to lead them out. God displayed his overwhelming power and authority in the plagues. He clearly demonstrated he was the Lord God of all, creator of the universe. He brought complete destruction to Pharaoh and his army in the same sea that he rescued the entire nation of the Hebrews. God protected by day, he protected by night. He provided food from heaven and water to drink. Truly, God displayed his great power in bringing them out of Egypt. We need to look back and remember, think back and remember what God did. So now, Joshua chapter 4, 19 to 24. People cross the Jordan. They're getting ready to go into the promised land. Again, a reminder. The people crossed the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and then they camped at Gilgal, just east of Jericho. It was there at Gilgal that Joshua picked up the 12 stones taken from the Jordan River. Then Joshua said to the Israelites, "In the future, your children will ask, 'What do these stones mean?' You are to tell them, 'This is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground.' For the Lord your God dried up the river right before your eyes, and he kept it dry until you were all across, just as he did at the Red Sea, when he dried it up until we had all crossed over. He did this so all the nations of the earth might know that the Lord's hand is powerful, and so you might fear the Lord your God forever." We, as sinful humans, forget what God has done for us in the past. We must constantly be reminded of what God has done in the past so we can walk forward in faith today. It's important to leverage the experiences and lessons that God has taught us. Let them not be forgotten or lost in the busyness of life. Our work for God is not about our tangible achievements, but rather who we have become in the process. Has our faith grown? Mentoring others, raising up the next generation. If you are here this morning and have not made a decision to be a follower of Christ, don't delay. Christ is our only hope for today and tomorrow. Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for your friendship, your support these past 5 years.